In this 100th podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend and CEO, Janie Schumaker. Come along as Michael Dexter and Holly Briggs talk with Janie about her insights on leadership, taking risks, and owning mistakes. This episode is called Certified Leadership, One Life Influencing Another.
Hello, and welcome to the BCEN Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. But most importantly, to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always valuable. I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN, and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, Director of Professional Development at BCEN. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Holly. I'm excited to be with you on this very special episode.
I am excited as well. In this episode of BCEN and Friends, we have a very special guest, both for who she is and also for the centenary episode she's appearing on for this podcast. For our 100th episode, we are honored to have our very own Chief Executive Officer at BCEN, Janie Schumaker, sitting down with us for this special recording. Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCEN friend, typically a co-host, but guest for today, Janie?
Yeah, absolutely. Janie Schumaker is a dedicated healthcare professional whose journey began in a nursing home doing laundry, and she furthered her education as a certified nursing assistant to an LPN and finally obtained her RN. Janie quickly recognized her passion for the emergency department, where she spent most of her career at the bedside and in nursing leadership. As the CEO of the Board of Certification for Emergency Nursing for the past 7 years, Janie is a fierce advocate for nurses, emphasizing the importance of professional development and specialty certification. Janie holds multiple degrees, advanced certifications, and is an active member in several nursing organizations. Outside of her professional life, Janie volunteers for an animal rescue in Kansas City and cherishes time with her family, including her husband, son, daughter-in-law, 2 granddaughters, 4 dogs, and the occasional foster pet, just because. Janie, welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us as our guest today.
Well, thank you, Michael and Holly. It's really fun to be here. Very excited and honored to be the guest today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we typically start a lot of conversations with telling us about the journey that got you here, and without going into your full journey, maybe you could just let us know through the experiences that you've had up until the role of CEO at BCEN. What are some of your more memorable roles you've had, and what are some of the more challenging ones?
Yeah, well, I would say probably the most favorite role, or the roles that I ever had, were definitely working at the bedside in the emergency department on the night shift. I started my career in the emergency department at a community hospital in Lawrence, Kansas, and worked there for several years. That's where I got my start in the emergency department. It was really hard to get in there because back then they would say, you have to have experience. We can't have you here until you have experience. So I had worked in the float pool for a couple of years, and I got floated to the emergency department pretty often. And that was really the only emergency experience I could put my finger on, but I finally wore them down and got in there. They gave me the absolute worst shift that no one wanted, but that was okay. So that's how I got into the emergency department. I loved working there. There were so many challenging patients, even though it was a community hospital. It is a big college town, so there was always something interesting, challenging, or eyebrow raising going on at night in that emergency department. So that was definitely a favorite. And the thing that made that so great was the best group of doctors I ever worked there, led by a doctor named Scott Robinson, one of my favorite, probably my all-time favorite, and Sabrina Pruitt. They made it what it was. And then, of course, the team of nurses that I worked with. And then my other favorite role was then I moved on and went to a level 1 trauma center in Kansas City and worked there for many, many, many years. And again, the night shift was always my favorite. The patients were challenging as well there. They made you think. You had to be on your toes. I eventually became a charge nurse there, and I really enjoyed managing patient flow, and we held patients there because it was an academic medical center, and we would have to hold patients for 3 or 4, maybe 6 hours. And like, we just got so upset about that, especially when you were the one trying to manage patient flow and keep things moving. Well, we thought 3 to 6 hours was bad back then, so it's nothing like it is today. So anyway, but it was challenging to work on the patient flow, and I really liked that part of it. I loved working with the residents. It was fun to help them learn, especially the ones that knew they needed nurses' help to learn. Some of them didn't realize that, but some of them did. And the teamwork, the teamwork in both places on night shift was always just amazing. And we were like a family, and we could rely on each other. And it was really fun time. So I enjoyed, those are probably my 2 favorite roles of all time. Just loved interacting with people and being able to help people feel better.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but in one of your absolute favorite roles, you mentioned working the absolute worst shift. So was that 7P to 7A? Was that a mid shift? What were you working?
Oh, it was 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. And I didn't mind it.
That's a tough time.
Yeah, I didn't really mind it because I was single. I didn't have a family yet, but nobody else wanted it. And I think that's how I was able to slide in there. And it was fine with me. Like, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to meet your goal, So I said, yep, sign me up. I'll be there from 3 to 1. I eventually ended up 7P to 7A, but 3 to 1 was where I started. You asked me about a challenging role. I've never really had a role per se that was so challenging. It's more about the leadership in the role that I was in. So probably my most challenging role, because of the leadership, I would say, was when I was an administrator over several departments in a hospital. And, just things like not being able to choose your own team of people to work on certain things or work in certain areas. You were hired for your experience and your expertise, but then you had people above you that just wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen to recommendations. They wanted to, for example, you might want to merge 2 services together, and you're saying, well, that's nice, but there isn't room in this particular building where we're trying to put it. And, folks would just do it anyway. And, it just doesn't work. And, it was one of those things where there was a demand for top box results, but since you couldn't pick your own team, you couldn't deal with low performers, things like that, you had no way to get any top box results. So that was what made it challenging. I don't think I've ever had a role that I didn't like or people to work with that I didn't enjoy. But I have had some really challenging leadership that just made things very difficult. So that's probably what I would say has been most challenging for me. But there's always something you can learn in those situations. You can always learn from that kind of a thing about what you don't want to do as a leader. So I'd say that was probably my most challenging role.
Well, Janie, you made a great point that the role may not be challenging in that you feel like you are qualified for it. You feel like you have the skills to, take on a role, but depending on how the leadership is above you, your success in that role can certainly be determined a lot by that. And so I would say that it's awesome that you learned from that and you took what maybe not to do in some situations, and maybe some things, hey, that was good. I want to incorporate that. That was not so great. I definitely don't want to do that, because I know your intro was enough to say it, but you are a leader, not just in the titles that you have, but in the way that you interact and you engage within the profession of nursing, also in the realm of certification and accreditation. You've led professional organizations, you've spearheaded lots of initiatives as both a volunteer and an employed administrator. So lots of leadership boxes ticked off. What would you say are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned to become the leader that you are today?
I appreciated that I knew this question ahead of time, because I wanted to, I could probably talk about this all afternoon, but I boiled this down to sort of my top 5. because I didn't want to get too long-winded on this, but leadership's like a favorite topic of mine. So the first thing I would say is that was a valuable lesson, and I kind of mentioned it a minute ago, is you can learn from everyone. There's not anyone you can't learn from. Even leaders or people that are doing things that you think, man, that's not really what we should be doing. You're learning from leadership or other people that have practices or behaviors. They can teach you how you don't want to treat somebody else. For example, if you did a bunch of work on something, some kind of a project or an initiative, you fixed a process in your department, you did a performance improvement project, and you really carried a lot of weight on it, and your boss comes along and says, yeah, look what I did. Look at these results I got. That doesn't feel very good for somebody to come along and take credit. So you learn really quickly from those kind of things that you experience yourself or see done to other people that's not what we were going to do to other people ever. That's number one. There's something you can learn from everyone, even in the most frustrating situation. Number two is, I think it's really important for people to have a mentor or people around them that will tell them the truth, not always just agree. Like, you get frustrated about something, maybe you're having a conflict with somebody, and so you go to the person and you lay it all out, you're venting away. And it's nice if you have somebody that can say, I hear you, boy, that is frustrating. And have you taken a moment to think about how maybe you contributed to that conflict as well? What was your part in it? So it's really helpful, I think, to have a mentor that will be honest with you. We all want somebody to agree with us when we're having some miserable experience. We all want somebody to go, oh yeah, that's so awful. But having a mentor that can help point out where you might have had an opportunity as well is super valuable. I recommend that for everybody. And if you can find more than one, that's even better. The third thing is that we're all human. So making mistakes is not the end of the world. Mistakes can be our very best teacher. And if you make a mistake, and it's significant, you'll hopefully learn from it and never make that same mistake again. Now, in healthcare, nobody wants to make a mistake. And I'm not saying let's all run out and make a bunch of mistakes. Nobody wants to make a mistake in healthcare. We have people's lives in our hands. We have to be very careful. We can do some major harm. I will tell you quickly about a mistake I was once mixed up in. And this was right about the time Joint Commission was coming out with dual identifiers, and everyone was rolling their eyes like, what in the world are they trying to make us do? But we had two patients in our emergency department. They were actually lying in beds beside each other with a curtain in between the two of them. They were both male. They were both African American. They were similar in age. Both of them came in around the same time that night. They both had their blood drawn. And guess what? Their blood was mislabeled. So one guy's blood was labeled with the other guy's name and vice versa. One of them was having a major MI. The other one was not. The one that was not having the major MI, since the blood was mislabeled, was admitted for his MI, which couldn't be replicated in any further EKGs or blood work or anything else. And the other guy was discharged. So that was not a good thing. So we had to really work hard to try to get the guy that was discharged back into our hospital because we had made this horrible mistake. So yeah, we're all rolling our eyes about dual identifiers. And then you have something like that happen and you realize, oh, I guess there is a reason why we do this. This is why the Joint Commission, as frustrating as they can be, well, they were onto something here. I never made a mistake like that again. I, in fact, was very vigilant about making sure when I was labeling blood specimens or any other thing that I was really careful about that. So you learn from those things, and both of those gentlemen ended up being okay, but you don't feel very good when things like that happen. So the thing about mistakes is you got to own them. You don't want to sweep them under the rug. We want to do that sometimes because it's like not okay sometimes to make a mistake, especially in healthcare, but you can't. You got to stand up. You got to own it. You need to apologize when necessary. And most importantly, let's learn from it and not repeat it, but don't let it define you. Everyone's human. Mistakes are going to happen. Number 4 is you don't have to know everything. You can't know everything. I think sometimes we are really nervous, especially when we get in a leadership role. Oh my gosh, we have to have all the answers. We have to know everything. And if we don't, we feel inadequate or subpar. you don't know everything. You're not going to know everything. So get comfortable with saying, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but we can find out, or I know somebody I can ask, or there's a resource I can go to, or I can do some research on that, but you're not going to know everything. So get comfortable with saying, I don't know. No one can know it all. And then I think the last thing is, I think emotional intelligence is a very, very good skill and tool to have. And I don't think any of us are born like with a high level of this. It's something that maybe needs to be worked on. Sometimes that's where this mentor comes in, because sometimes with an emotional intelligence type thing, you may not realize where your blind spots are. So it's good if you have people that can help you find those, and then you can work on that. And part of emotional intelligence too, I think, which is really powerful, is managing how you react to things, because there's going to be things that make you really mad. There's going to be things that cause this big emotional reaction inside of you. And just learning to manage your own reactions is very powerful. That's the one thing you can do, is control how you speak and respond to things. So learning how you react to things and how you're going to manage your behavior, I think is goes along with this emotional intelligence, and very important. So those are my 5 things. Those are my 5 lessons that I feel like are really valuable.
Well, thank you for sharing those, Janie. I think we have a little micro class going on here on leadership. So for the ones listening to the podcast, that's a free class for you. Those are really good examples. And I've had a lot of similar things happen to me over the years, with people wanting to challenge, do you know this? Do you know that? And, not being able to respond incorrectly, or being able to just say, I don't, but I know some people that do know that. And building those relationships with those people is also important, I think, it's to becoming successful. And we have a lot of leadership things we can talk about, but I wanted to jump back on the subject of certification, because we are the board of certification for emergency nursing. And you don't just hold a certification or certifications through BCEN, you hold them through other organizations. So looking outside of the organization that we work for and looking holistically at nursing certification, what really inspired you to start down a path of certification through executive nursing practice or certified professional in healthcare quality? You recently have the Institute for Credentialing Excellence certification. So why do you continue to seek out different certifications, and what makes you want to maintain those as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important to demonstrate that you're committed to and serious about the role that you're in. And any role that you're in, pretty much, you can find a specialty certification for. There are many of them in nursing, about any specialty you can think of. And some outside of nursing. Some of those specialty certifications can also be multidisciplinary. Like if you're a diabetic educator, there may be some people that aren't nurses getting that one. So there's always something to learn. I think that lifelong learning is very important. And if you're going to be doing the lifelong learning, and you can lead up to a certification to demonstrate that you have done the work to initially do some lifelong learning in this specialty role. And then, of course, we're going to continue that because it's not finished ever. I think it's just really important. I like to be able to say, I have studied this. I'm going to continue to study this because I'm going to maintain my certification. So we're constantly learning. I may not have exactly mastered it, but I'm certainly on my way to doing that, or I'm going to continue to work on mastering that. So I'm going to demonstrate that through a certification because I want to stand out as one of the best in my field. And I want everybody to know that I'm committed to my patients or to my role, and I'm serious about this. And my very first certification ever was the certified emergency nurse. And I was one of the first people in my emergency department to take it. And there was only a couple of others that had it. And I would ask around, because I was still a fairly new nurse, and I was about a little over a year in my emergency nursing full-time role. And I would ask around about it, and people would say, oh, you should not try to take that. That's like something that really smart people do. And since I was so new in the emergency department, I really wanted to get it because I wanted to demonstrate not only to the patients, but to the people I worked with, hey, I'm really serious about this. I want to be the best emergency nurse I can be. So I'm going to go study and I'm going to demonstrate to you how serious I am. And I want to do it for my patients. I want to be able to take really good care of them. So I want to study, always be learning and be able to give them the best possible care. And as my roles have evolved, I'm not taking care of patients anymore, but I want to take care of the business of certification. You know, I'm responsible as the CEO for this organization. So I want to know as much as I can know to serve the nurses that we serve well and run this business so that it is successful. I think lifelong learning is important. And I think if we want to remain relevant, we don't ever get to say that we're done. And I think that it's possible to move on from certain things. I think our interests can certainly change. For example, I did emergency management work for years. And if I don't do any more emergency management work, I'm going to be okay with that. I don't know necessarily feel the need to do that kind of work anymore, but so I think it's okay for interests to change and for your learning to evolve to a different place. But I think lifelong learning is important and it's necessary. And even after people retire, like after I retire someday, I have a list of things started that I just can't get to right now that I want to learn about. And so it won't be really about business, the nursing certification anymore, but it'll be other things that I'm interested in. So I just really enjoy the challenge of learning something new. And then I love to be able to try to apply that to the exam and prove that I can pass the exam. So lifelong learning, I'm always going to be doing it.
Yeah, well, I like what you said about being committed to your role, because I feel like that's a huge aspect of certification. It's a personal commitment, not only to pass an exam, but to maintain that, to do better in our role, to be a better leader, to show everybody else that we took on a big challenge and we succeeded. And I think it's great that you're pushing that forward and a real example of that. So Holly, I'll turn it back over to you, but that's a great answer, Janie. Thank you.
I could listen to you talk about leadership. I could listen to you talk about certifications. Obviously, it's very apparent that those are two of your passions. And I will say that it's not a well-known fact, but this podcast is actually in its 5th season, recording its 100th episode with you, but it wouldn't be here if not for you. Because along with you being a leader, along with you being a certified nurse and kind of embodying both of those things, you're also an innovator. Because this podcast is one example, but you also launched BCEN Learn and you created like an entire service line within the company of BCEN for continuing education. And again, these are just 2 examples within BCEN, but you kind of just get out there, challenge the status quo, and you help to lead others and even yourself kind of outside the comfort zone, kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. What motivates you to do that?
It was Wayne Gretzky that said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think about that almost every day. So what shot do we need to be taking that we're going to miss? It's like when somebody says, oh, I don't know if I should ask about that. They'll probably just tell me no. Well, the answer is always no if the question isn't asked. And the shot is always missed if we don't take aim. So I do like to try new things. Both personally and professionally, I do realize and recognize very much that I am much more comfortable putting my neck out and taking risks than a lot of other people are. I can see that in my own household. I'm definitely the risk taker. Everybody else is like, well, no, I don't really think we want to do that. But I think I like to really listen to the people that we serve, which are nurses. And I love nurses. I think nurses are very special people. So I think it's important for BCEN to listen and hear what they're asking for and try to meet those needs. So that sometimes requires going outside of what we want to comfortably do every day and trying some new things. So the BCEN and Friends podcast started as a place to have interesting conversations, and we wanted a variety of people, and we wanted some thought leaders, and we wanted to be able to help people learn new things. And it's kind of evolved now into, it's a really great place to highlight what some of the impactful and really special things that some of our audience, our nurses, what are some of those great things they're out there doing to make a difference every day? And Holly and Michael, you have been key in really getting the podcast to where it is today. And I'm very proud of the podcast. And I love that we have a platform where we can bring people in and showcase some of the very special things that nurses are doing. And occasionally we have guests that aren't nurses, and that's great too. There's a lot of people out there doing great things that our audience would be interested in. So I love that we have this way to showcase our nurses. And I love where the BCEN and Friends podcast has evolved to and gotten to. And I'm really glad that we started it because, it is extra work. Holly, you know this, you lead these podcasts. So, it does take some extra work to get these done. And what's the easiest thing to do? The easiest thing to do is sit back in your chair and say, no, we don't really need to have that extra work. But on the other hand, then we lose the whole chance to be able to speak with all these amazing people that we speak to and get to know them and let them tell their story and show them off. So we lose that whole opportunity. So I'm really glad we did it. BCE and Learn, we would hear comments and from our surveys that we do occasionally in our audience, our nurses were telling us for years, I wish you guys would do some education. I wish you had education available that we could use to recertify. Some of the education out there is just, it's just not what we need. It's not meeting our needs. So we said, you know what? Let's help meet those needs. There's so many things that nurses need to know and learn. The space is big enough for BCEN to contribute some high quality education. And BCEN Learn has really taken off. So we have the monthly webinars, we have the courses, we have the in-person conference. And I'm really proud of BCEN Learn and where it is now. And anybody, I think, who's experienced it understands what I'm talking about. And we're very, very, very interested in seeing people's feedback. We look at that all the time so we can make improvements and make sure that we're hitting the mark. So people are getting education that they can use the next day when they go back to work. And I'm very proud of BCEN Learn. But again, that was another one of those things that was like easier just to sit back and have certification exams. We already have those. Let's just keep those going. But that really didn't meet the needs of our nurses. So I'm really proud of it. I'm glad we did it. And I'm excited to see where our fabulous Learn team is gonna take it into the future. The last thing I'll say about this is a lot easier to do and digest when you work with the A team, which I do. I work with the A team. I'm very fortunate. Two of the A team I'm talking with right now, Holly and Michael, and the whole BCEN team and our board are incredible. So it's easier to take risks when you have the A team. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I need to take risks too, I want to do this next thing, that's great. If you don't have the A team, I would suggest working on that first, but it's easier when you have the A team to work with. And our team, I'm convinced, could do anything they want to. We're small, but we're mighty. And if you've been around BCEN for any time at all, we're not going to do anything that's just average or adequate. We're going to try to do it better than anybody else or put out something that's just a really high quality, amazing product. So that's the other thing. If you're going to do it well. So that's my answer to taking risks. It's necessary and also easy to do with the A team.
Well, thank you. It's a good answer. And it's good advice as well. You're right. Like if we do want to take risks, you better be sure you have a good team around you to support the risks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Janie, I get the pleasure of asking you one of our standard questions from this podcast that we've had for a long time now. And it's always interesting. We always get interesting answers to it. But is there a person or a moment in your career that greatly impacted you?
Yep. I thought a lot about this. I knew you were going to ask me this. There are so many things I could say, but I had a mentor very early in my career who was a registered nurse, and I worked with her at night. I was a tech. We worked on a mental health unit with psychiatric patients. I was very young then, and trying to go to school. She really must have seen something in me. She really believed in me. Very encouraging to me. And she told me I could do anything I wanted to do. She said, you've got the horsepower, you've got the smarts, you can do anything you want to. And we worked together for a while. She ended up retiring, but after she retired, whether I wanted to or not, and I did want to because she was fabulous, but she took me to lunch once a month. She sat down with me and she in her head, we had agreed to some things that I was going to do. There were some goals that I was going to achieve. She had them in her head. She didn't need to write them down. And every month when we went to lunch, and she didn't take no for an answer. If you were sick, you were going to reschedule in a couple of days or whatever. She didn't take no for an answer. We went to lunch. We went over my goals, and I had to account for where I was with these goals. She just really cared about me, and she didn't have to. She didn't have to do that. And I really needed her back then. So, we stayed in touch for many, many years. She ended up moving out of state, but she wrote me letters and still wanted to know for my next goal, where was I? And she was amazing. And I often think, I hope that I can do that for somebody, or I hope I've done a little bit of something like that for somebody, because I don't know if I'd have been as on track if it had not have been for her. I really was not okay with ever disappointing her, because I just thought so highly of her. So I stayed right on track, and she made sure of it. And we went to lunch. I can see the place. She was amazing. So that is probably the person who really impacted me, because I mean, I might have still accomplished some things, but probably not as fast or as well if I hadn't have had her. So her name is Claudine, and she was incredible.
I know that this podcast is only audio, but looking at your faces, you were talking about her and just seeing the expression of not tearful, definitely full of joy, but just very thankful as you were talking about her, was really moving. And it causes me to think about those people who have come alongside me at different points in my journey in nursing, my career path, and have been that extra nudge towards setting a goal, meeting a goal, keeping on track. And, it's just like they came in at the right time. And it sounds like that's what Claudine did for you, is that she was the person that you needed at the time that you needed her. And I'm sure that saying, hey, do you think that all this time and effort is worth it? And I feel like even if she didn't know where you ended up now, like she would have said, yes, it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
And not seen it as something hard, but something that was definitely worthwhile, that you were worth the effort. I think that's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that. We love that question on this podcast. It always inspires, and it's wonderful to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so much easier, like you said, Holly, to come alongside somebody, even if it's for an hour, just to teach them or help them. So much easier, so much more impactful than to be the person that's eating our young, right? It's just the person down the road. You never know that if they will remember, oh my gosh, that person spent that hour with me, and I'll never forget it. So anyway, so much easier just to be helpful.
I agree. Kindness and correction, when they're hand in hand, are a lot easier to take
Yeah.
than just
Absolutely.
being the other person. Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, Janie, I get the part of our podcast where I get to ask you a few rapid fire questions. And they're really just some of your favorites, so that we can get to know you a little bit better outside of all the things that you do and the roles that you have. So this is a fun question. If there was a career outside of healthcare that you'd like to try, or thought, like, if I hadn't been a nurse, I would have been a great fill in the blank.
Well, I would have either been a really great rock star, or I would have been a veterinarian. Neither one of those were really feasible when I got out of high school. The vet school was a couple hours away, and getting to be a rock star, well, that has its own challenges. So the veterinary school was a couple hours away. I really didn't have the financial means back then to tackle the veterinarian thing, with it being so far away. And I had started working in that nursing home doing laundry that you mentioned at the beginning. And I just really enjoyed hanging out with the people who lived there and helping them with their meals. And so I thought nursing would be a great option for me, and plenty of opportunities to go to nursing school right there. Didn't have to think about moving 2 hours away. So that was just more doable for me than the veterinarian or the rock star. But that's what I would have liked to have done had I not been a nurse, to answer your question.
No, the vet part, I can even see how your work with the Animal Rescue League, like you kind of get a little feel for that. And, it's like AC/DC said,
Yeah.
it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And so
Yes.
that one's hard. I think
Yeah.
now with social media and certain platforms, people are getting a chance to live the dream of a rock star, even if it's only
Yeah.
2 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
But so maybe we'll have to work on that so you can also check that box. But we'll have to sit down with some people and work on that at some point. But love that. Yes, let's rock. All right, moving on. Got some 3 categories here. We're going to kind of go through. These can be best of all time kind of things, or they can just be something you're into right now. So, what would be a good leadership book that you would recommend?
Yeah. My favorite one is The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. It helps you think about leadership a little bit differently. And I agree with the 5 levels that he defines in the book. And the first one is you are a leader because someone gave you a job with a title, but doesn't really make you a leader yet. And it kind of goes from there. And then level 5 is like the highest, the pinnacle of leadership that I'm always working toward. But that is just the best book. It really puts leadership in perspective. And I love that book very much. I'm a huge John Maxwell fan. And then my second backup to that would be, and I know it's an old book, but it's a good one, is Good to Great by Jim Collins. So those would be a couple of recommendations that I have there.
Awesome. Awesome. I've read some John Maxwell, but I'll have to put both of those on my short list to read. So thank you for that. All right. Is there like a favorite quote or something that just kind of motivates you?
Yeah, my favorite quote probably over the years, it's always lasted with me. I love the quote that says, "Service is the rent you pay for room on this earth." And I believe it's credited to Shirley Chisholm, but that is probably my all-time favorite quote. And I really do believe that. I believe for myself that I should not just sit back and do all things I want to do, even though that does sound nice some days. I think that it is important for me to be able to give back in some way. So that quote really resonates with me and has for as long as I can remember.
I love that. Very good quote that helps to shift the perspective of not just maybe a moment, but like your day, week, month, year to move towards that idea of I'm not just here for the things maybe that I want to do, even though, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's some days that feel like those are the priority, but most days really should be I'm here to do something that's going to impact and make things better
Yeah.
for me being here. So, is there a musical artist or a song that helps to kind of shift your perspective? I mean, since you want to be a rock star, I feel like you might have more than one favorite, but please share with
Yeah. I am a huge Meatloaf fan, but probably the song that I listen to a lot when I need to get some energy going. I really like that song "Unstoppable" by Sia. That's probably the one I listen to a lot when I'm just trying to get some energy and help my brain get started thinking about something. I like that. But I can often also be found listening to Meatloaf. I saw Meatloaf in concert 2 or 3 times when, and it was a whole theatrical show and it was amazing. I miss Meatloaf. I'm sorry he's gone. And Freddie Mercury is another favorite of mine. Yeah, so I mean, Little Queen never hurt anybody either.
Yeah, I've got some good music. And
Yes.
I think that you hit on a point that sometimes a song just is the right song for where you maybe need to get to. Like sometimes a song,
Yeah.
a bridge from where you're at right now, but where you're trying to get to. And, perhaps maybe the musical people got it right, that sometimes you just need a song in the middle of your day to kind of help you get from one
Yeah.
to another. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Do you have any other hobbies or like a self-care go-to, something that just really helps you kind of reset so that way you can go back and give 110% to all the things that you do? What helps take care of you?
Well, this will be a huge surprise to anybody that knows me, but I love to spend time with my dogs. They are so non-judgmental. They're always happy to see me. They don't care if my hair is combed or whatever. I love to spend time with my dogs. I like to walk with them or work on some training with them. Also getting lost in some kind of a good series, whether that be, could be a book, could be something on Netflix, just, it just takes your brain away and you don't have to think about whatever it was you were not wanting to think about, or just if you just need a break from all the thinking, a good book or a good series. I love to get a facial. I'm not a massage person, but I do like to get a facial. That's a great thing. And I think meditation and quiet time to think, or maybe just time not to think, but just to be quiet, I think are some things that I like to do. Sometimes just some deep breaths, or, just trying to reset and shut out some of the stress. I really try very hard to manage stress and not let it get to me. I've not always been very good about that, but it's been a work in progress. But as I was saying earlier, you can really only control yourself and how you're going to respond to something. So I always think about that when I'm thinking about self-care, like, okay, what of this is in my control? What of this can I actually do something about? And the rest of it sometimes just has to go sit on the sidelines, really.
I'm glad that you take moments to do things, whether that be taking those couple of deep breaths, whether that be, just sitting quietly for a minute, whether that be a good walk with your dog or whatever it might be. And those listening in the audience, that you just take those time every day and that you prioritize a couple of moments every day that help you get back to you. So that way you can go out there and be the you that the whole world needs. So thank you for sharing all of that. Janie, if our audience would like to follow you online, what social media platforms could they follow you on?
I am on LinkedIn, and I am also on Facebook. One of these days, I'm going to put a page up called Shenanigans by Bones, but I don't have that. Yes, that's one of the things that I'm going to be learning more about in my spare time. But Bones is my rescue dog that sort of inspired all my rescue work. And so I have aspirations to do a page that talks about rescue dogs and fostering and all of that. But so that could be coming in the future. But I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn right now.
I appreciate you finding the time to sit down with Holly and I and talk about all these things on the podcast, Janie, because you have a lot going on and you could have been sitting down putting together Shenanigans by Bones, but you sat down with us today. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for the micro session on leadership and for talking about certification and all the other things that inspire you and have inspired us as well as so many others. I think you're doing a fantastic job in the emergency nursing world, and we really appreciate taking the time to chat with you today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to take this time to thank Janie for joining us for this episode of BCEN and Friends. Thank you, Janie, for sharing your experiences, your insight, your expertise as a genuine innovator in the nursing profession. The humility, kindness, and authenticity with which you lead is truly groundbreaking. And I'm very thankful for the many lessons that I've learned under your leadership, and I hope to continue learning for a very long time. And to all of our listeners, we hope you will stay tuned as we continue with BCEN and Friends and bring you new and meaningful content and perspectives. If you have a suggestion for an episode, please email us at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs, here with Michael Dexter and Janie Schumaker, and on behalf of the entire BCEN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.